Hello and welcome to the final section of how to cut out hair in Photoshop. This section is super cool. We're going to be cutting out a subject with short hair and a beard. So we're going to be creating custom brushes for both our subject's hair and his beard. Now, jumping into Photoshop, let's go ahead and double click here. We're going to open up, we're in Chapter 3, Section 5, Beards and Short Hair. Let's hit Open, and we're going to hit F for full screen. So just like in previous tutorials, I'm just going to spend a second cutting our subject out of the background using the pen tool, and then we'll come in and fill out the detail. We're going to do his head hair and beard hair, and he's got some arm hair too, so we're going to do the arm hair. So I'll go ahead and pen tool, and then we'll get back to you. So we've outlined our subject with the pen tool. Now let's go ahead and right click. We're going to go to Make Selection and feather that by 1 pixel and click on our layer mask icon. So our subject is fairly well cut out. We're going to grab a solid color fill layer, make that white, and bring that to the background. So we're looking pretty good. Now the first thing we're going to take care of is our subject's beard. And looking at our subject's beard, we kind of have a lot of relatively curly, relatively dense, thick hair. So we're going to be creating a brush that mimics that hair. So let's go ahead and start by creating a new layer. There we are. And I'm just going to use our brush tool. Now we can actually use our brush we created earlier in this tutorial. Right click and we can go to Flern Hair 1. Okay, and this is just a brush that's going to look like this. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do is create some of my own like little scraggly hairs here, basically, is my goal. And I'm kind of going in an outward pattern there, just like this. There we are. You know, in this case, I'm just using my Wacom tablet. You can also do this with the pen tool. So let's show you how to do it with the pen tool. Let's hit Control Command A to select all and then delete that. Hit the delete key. My path, so we're just going to call this subject. There we go. Let's make a new path, and basically you can just kind of follow a hair. So, you know, in this case we'll just kind of follow a hair. There we go. Making sure that it's kind of curly. Okay, so that's one hair. Now you can remember we'd learned this previously. Let's just make our subject invisible. You can right click and go to Stroke Path. There we go. And hit OK. And we'll just see how this looks. Control or Command H. We'll hide that. Alright, that looks okay. Let's go back to our brush tool. We're just going to make our brush a little bit smaller. And we're going to bring up our shape dynamics. I'm going to bring my minimum diameter up a little bit more. Okay. So let's go ahead and redo that. So we're just going to go to our paths. I'm going to deselect my path. Let's hit Control or Command A to select all again. I'll hit delete. That's just going to clear our layer. It's just a real quick tool for doing that. Alright, we'll stroke path there again and then kind of see how that looks. Yeah, that's starting to look a little bit better. Let's just hit undo. I'm going to bring up my minimum diameter a little bit more. And let's try it again. Alright, there we go. So we have something that looks like that. Now, let's just do this a couple of times. So you can use your pen tool. The reason I'm showing you with the pen tool, I know it seems more complicated, but your results are going to be the same whether you have a tablet or have a mouse. So I think it's probably just a little bit more universally applicable. That looks pretty good. So let's go ahead. We've got our first path. We can just delete our path. We don't need that anymore. We'll just create our second one there. That's going to be our next hair. So we'll create a new layer for each of these hairs just so we can kind of move them around. Alright, we'll stroke this path. There we are. And we'll create a new layer. And I want to create a new path as well. There we are. And let's stroke that path as well. See how nice this is? We're creating beard hairs. There we are. And let's stroke that path there. So I'm putting these on individual layers, and the reason I'm doing that is because we're going to create a cluster of hairs and then use that as our beard brush. Let's just make a couple more. We're going to make a new layer, go back to our paths, And there we go. Right click and stroke that path. So you can see this really doesn't take too long. One more layer, and there we are. And we'll just kind of... You don't want straight lines. Like, you don't want to just click like that. You want to click and drag, and that's just going to make curved lines. There we go. Let's stroke that path there as well. Okay, so you can see each of these different, what's going to wind up being beard hair is on a new layer. So let's go ahead and bring these together. Now, what I'm going to do is rotate them around, because I want them to be kind of dual purpose. There we go. I want them to work on both sides of the brush. There we are. Okay, maybe that one's just going to stick out there a little bit more. So that's the making of a beard brush. I know it looks a little bit funny now, but it's going to look like a beard in a second. So with that brush, again, we just have these black lines on a white background. I'm going to hit M for our marquee tool. We're just going to select that, and we'll go to Edit and down to Define Brush Preset. All right, we'll just call this Beard 1. There we go. And now we'll make all these invisible, create a new layer, and you can see when I paint with Beard 1, it looks like that. Now, we just need to do a few things to the brush itself to basically just make sure it starts to look like actual beard hair. So let's go ahead and just clear this layer real quick. We're going to go to our brush settings. So if you don't see your brush settings, just go to Window and down to Brush Settings. And the first thing we're going to do is turn on Shape Dynamics. Let's click there. And we're going to bring our size jitter all the way up. There we go. And I'm going to bring my control to pen pressure. So the harder I press, the larger this hair is going to be. Let's bring our minimum diameter up a little bit too. There we go. Now the next thing we want to do, kind of looks like a bug or something. Next thing I want to do is bring up my angle jitter. And this is just going to rotate every little angle. So you can see already towards the edge of here, it doesn't look like it's the same thing repeating over and over again, right? As opposed to right over here, where you can kind of see it's the same pattern repeating over again. This, because we've got it rotating with the angle jitter, it looks a lot more random. I'm going to hit Flip X jitter and Flip Y jitter. There we go. So we're just getting a super duper like random pattern, and that's good with hair. The next thing we're going to turn on is scattering. I'm going to click on both axes, and we're going to scatter this just a little bit. Now, if you go too far, you're going to get something that looks like this, but just a little bit of scattering is just going to give you like a little bit more randomness. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and see what we can do with this brush. Kind of looks like little bugs or something. All right, let's go ahead and just delete that layer. We don't need it, and we're going to go back to our subject. So now on our layer mask for our subject, we're going to paint white on our layer mask, and I'm just going to simply paint right over here towards the edge of my subject. There we go, and we're just going to paint in beard hair. There we go. Now, here where you have your scattering, if you want, like here, as I'm painting it in, I'm like, yeah, that could be a little bit more dense. So you could go to your brush tip shape and bring your spacing down, which will make it a little bit more dense if you need to. Or if you want to be less dense, you can just bring your spacing up. So you can kind of go either way. There we go. And this is looking really good. Now you can also make your brush larger and smaller. So let's make our brush a little bit smaller, you know, for these little fine areas of detail, maybe around the mustache and things like that. So the mustache is actually a little bit of a different texture, so we're gonna solve that in a slightly different way. All right, so making our brush larger and smaller, you can see, is just gonna kind of give us a little bit more randomness, because we want this to look just super random. Make a couple like really large brushes. Oh, a little bit too much. There we go. And here we can see we've done a pretty nice job. Maybe I just overdid it a little bit. We've done a really nice job cutting our subject out and adding that beard hair. There we go. Nice and zoomed out, I can get a good sense of like the randomness there. Alright, so let's hold Alt or Option and take a look at our layer mask. That's a good looking layer mask. Now we want to do something similar with the mustache, but the hair on the mustache is a little bit more directional, so we're going to make another brush. Before we make that other brush, let's just save this one. So we're going to go right up here to New Brush Preset, and we'll just call this Beard 1, hit OK, and there we go. We have Beard 1 as our brush now. There we go. Let's go to Edit and down to Presets. We'll go to the Preset Manager. Okay, and I'm just going to delete this other Beard 1 so I don't get confused. So we'll just hit Delete, because that's just the brush shape, and this is with all of our shape dynamics and scattering and everything in there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and make the mustache. Now the mustache we're going to do similar. Let's just make our subject invisible. Similar, but this time, you can see I'm using the same hair here. This time I don't want the hair to be nearly as scattered. We want it to kind of be, you know, in this kind of all going in about the same direction there. So same exact hair, we're just slightly different application here. There we go. Let's use M for our marquee tool, make that a selection, edit and down to define brush preset. There we go, we'll just call that mustache, and then let's create a new layer and perfect our mustache brush. So here we go, there's our mustache. Now first thing, we're going to turn on shape dynamics, turn our size jitter up, minimum diameter up, and angle jitter just a little bit. There we are. Now our angle jitter, the control, I want to be on direction. So I want this to go with the direction that I actually wind up painting. There we are. Now I can go back to my brush tip shape and change the angle of the brush itself so we have something that looks like this. So as we paint along like this, let's just clear this layer. There we go. As we do something like that, we can see we've got, you know, this shape is kind of starting to take shape. Now we can go to our scattering. I'm going to scatter both axes. Back to our shape dynamics, let's flip X and flip Y. And again, this is just going to get us, you can see already this looks more random than this, right? There we go. So that looks pretty good. Now we can decide how we want this to be. I can go like this, for instance, if our subject is visible. Let's just grab another color here. So I could go like this along the mustache, or I could paint in that direction, in which case I would bring my angle to 0 and then just do something like this. So paint down in that direction. Alright, and I think we're gonna do this. With the angle of your brush, you can choose to have it be, you know, parallel, or you can have it be perpendicular to your brush stroke. And that's just going to depend on how you want to paint this in. Alright, I think we are ready to go. So let's go ahead, I'm going to keep this, I want this to be parallel, so we'll make our brush angle 0. Let's go back to our layer mask now, and now I'm just going to paint like in this direction there. Okay, we're just going to paint like that. There we go. Okay, good deal. So you can kind of see it's just, you know, kind of coming out all in the same direction there. Now, it's picking up a little bit of the background, where you can see we have a slightly different quality here than we do here. It's kind of all facing the same direction. The beard is just a little bit more wild. Okay, now that looks pretty good. Now we can actually use this same brush here on the back of the head. Let's just make it a bit smaller. There we go. Because basically it's, you know, if you paint with it, it's just going to create something that looks like this, which for the most part is going to be, you know, just a solid edge, but every now and then you'll have a hair that sticks out, right? So that makes sense. Now, what we can do, just if we want to make it pretty even across the top of his head, you can definitely just paint in here with the brush tool if you want to do that. There we go. Or you can create, let's just try this on a new layer here. You can create a pen path. There we go. And then we're going to right click. I'm going to stroke this path. We're going to turn off simulate pressure for now. And you can see basically I was just able to stroke that pen path with that brush. So let's try doing that instead of just on a new layer. Let's do it on the layer mask. So we'll right click here. We'll go to stroke path, hit OK, and there we go. Let's just hit Control or Command H to hide that path. And you can see there's our before, just solid edge, and there's the after. Again, we just stroked that pen path that I just made with that brush, and it just added that level of detail in there, which is pretty cool. Now I'm going to just bring in a little bit more detail. Let's bring our angle up and our brush nice and small. So I think that definitely worked, but we just want like a few more little flyaways. So with a large brush, you can clearly see it's like a gnarly, twisted beard hair. If you make your brush really small, that quality goes away, and you just kind of have the edge that you're working with there. So you can do either way. We did start with using the pen path to stroke this back here, and I'm just kind of filling it in with the brush. Just makes it look a little bit more random, and that's kind of what we want for head hair. Alright, we'll go down the neck there as well. Okay, don't worry about the color difference. We'll take care of that in a minute. And then we'll just do the same thing on our subject's arm as well. There we are. Oh. Kind of starting inside of the edge there and going towards the outside. I don't want to overdo it. Maybe we'll just make our angle a little bit following the same direction as his arm. And that's going to get a blur on the layer mask. Pretty cool. And let's just paint that in too. Alright, looking really good, and we'll just say, you know what, he's probably got a little bit of hair there too. Okay, so this part of the hair looks really good. So I think the beard is looking good, the mustache looks good, the back of his head looks good. We just need a couple more little flyaways here, just to make that look a little bit more realistic. Let's just take care of our subject's eyebrow real quick. Maybe make that brush just a little bit smaller. There we go. And just paint black on there. Cool. That looks good. And now we're going to go ahead and take care of this part of the hair, because obviously what I'm doing texture-wise doesn't exactly fit with this part of the hair.